Hello, my beautiful friends. Welcome back to Threads of Kindness, where we explore stories of Karens who like to make up stories, but this time, things backfire. In this episode, we have some really tough situations, from Karen pretending to be attacked over a toy, to a family arguing over lottery winnings. Today's list is full of plot twists that will leave you in awe. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already, because we're diving into this world of drama right now. I never thought I'd be the kind of guy to win the lottery. Every day I'd go to my regular office job, do my best to save a little, and take care of my family. Life wasn't fancy, but it was steady, and I was grateful. Still, every now and then, I'd daydream about what I'd do if I had just a little extra. Maybe a small vacation or an upgrade for my wife Julia's old car that kept giving her trouble. One Friday after work, I stopped by the convenience store near our house to pick up a few things. On a whim, I grabbed a lottery ticket. It wasn't something I did often, and honestly, I'd forgotten about it the moment I slipped it into my wallet. That ticket was just a little throwaway excitement, something that cost a few bucks for a chance, however slim, to dream a little bigger. A few days later, during dinner, I found the ticket again while looking for change. Julia had turned on the TV to the evening news, and just as we were about to clear the table, the winning lottery numbers were announced. One by one, each number matched the numbers on my ticket. I blinked a few times, my mind racing, trying to process it. I won! Julia, we won the lottery, I managed to say, almost in disbelief. After taxes, the $50,000 prize left us with about $34,000. Not exactly life-changing, but still, it felt like a gift. I started thinking right away about how to make this windfall mean something. For Julia, for the kids, and maybe even for myself. First, I decided to put part of it into fixing up Julia's car. That car had been with her since before we met, but it was getting old and unreliable. I knew it would mean a lot to her to have it running smoothly again, without the constant worry of it breaking down. Then I thought about a vacation, something Julia and I hadn't had since our honeymoon. It was something I'd always wanted to do, especially now with our kids old enough to enjoy a real family trip. I pictured us all together on a beach, soaking up the sun and letting go of everyday worries for a while. Just thinking about it made me feel like a weight was lifting off my shoulders. For the first time in years, I was actually excited about making plans. I wanted this money to bring us closer, to give my family experiences we wouldn't normally afford. It felt like my years of hard work had finally paid off, and I was ready to use this small fortune to give us something special. But what I didn't realize was that this money would soon be the source of unexpected pressure and some tough conversations. I was about to learn that having a little extra can sometimes bring challenges you'd never expect. And what I thought was a gift would soon put my relationships to the test in ways I couldn't have imagined. Just as I was beginning to map out our plans with the lottery money, my daughter Emily came to me with a different idea. Emily is my oldest, a bright and ambitious young woman attending Dartmouth. She's been working hard to keep up her grades, but like a lot of students these days, she's racked up a considerable amount of student loan debt. She's never asked us for much financially beyond the support we'd always planned on giving her and her brother, $10,000 each to help with school or whatever they needed as they grew up. But now, with this sudden extra money in the family, Emily saw an opportunity. One evening, she approached me with a look that was both hopeful and determined. "Dad," she started, "I was thinking, maybe instead of a vacation, you could use the lottery money to help pay off some of my student loans. It would mean so much to me to have that weight lifted." I took a deep breath, understanding the pressure she must feel, but also feeling a twinge of resistance. I'd planned for this money to give us something together as a family. Memories, shared experiences, things we hadn't been able to do in years. Gently, I explained, "Emily, I know college debt can feel overwhelming, but your mom and I already helped you and your brother with $10,000 each, and this money is something I wanted to use for all of us, not just one person." Her face fell, the hope quickly turning into frustration. "So, you'd rather spend it on a trip than help your own daughter with something important? Do you know how hard it is to manage all this debt?" "I get it, Emily," I replied, trying to keep my voice calm. "But this is something I wanted to do after so many years of working. I need a little of this for myself and for your mom. We've supported you both as much as we can, but this feels like a chance to finally do something just for us." Clearly disappointed, Emily didn't push me further that night, but I had a feeling the conversation wasn't over. A few days later, I noticed a shift in Julia's attitude. Normally, she was supportive of my decisions, but suddenly she started dropping hints that maybe Emily had a point. "You know," Julia began one evening, "Emily's loans are tough on her. Maybe you could put off the vacation for a bit, help her out first?" I felt blindsided. Julia knew how much this trip meant to me. I'd already invested in fixing her car, making sure it was in perfect shape for her. Now she was echoing Emily's request, and it stung a bit. "Julia, I thought you were on board with this plan," I said, surprised. She sighed. "I am, but doesn't helping Emily now count for more? The vacation could wait." I suddenly felt cornered, caught between my own plans and the expectations of my family. This money, meant as a gift, was starting to feel like a burden. What I thought would bring us together seemed to be slowly pulling us apart. The pressure from both Emily and Julia grew heavier each day. What had started as a joyous windfall now felt like a complicated maze of expectations. Julia had initially been thrilled when I told her about the vacation plans. We'd spent so many years working and saving, rarely ever taking a moment just for us, and she'd been supportive of using the lottery winnings as a chance to finally unwind together. But now, with Emily's financial troubles in the picture, Julia's outlook was changing, and not in a small way. One evening, after dinner, Julia sat me down. "Look, I understand that you're excited about the trip, but wouldn't it be better if we shortened it a bit? Maybe save some of that money to help Emily out?" I tried to stay patient, but frustration was bubbling under the surface. "Julia, we talked about this. We've already helped her. We set aside $10,000 for her and another $10,000 for Luke, and that was our promise to them. Now that this money has come along, I just wanted us to have something for ourselves for once." Julia's face tightened, and her tone shifted. "So you're saying a beach vacation is more important than helping your own daughter get a fresh start? Do you know how much it would mean to her?" The words stung, and I could feel the tension rising. "Julia," I replied, "this isn't about choosing a vacation over our daughter. It's about sticking to our plan. This money was a surprise, yes, but I'm tired of putting everything I want aside. We've been working our entire lives, and I've already spent part of this on your car and the surgery you wanted." The mention of the surgery caught her off guard, and her expression hardened. A few months before, Julia had undergone a cosmetic procedure she'd wanted for years, and I'd paid $5,000 out of pocket for it without a second thought. "So you're throwing that in my face now?" she snapped. "That was for both of us. I wanted to feel better about myself, and I thought you wanted that too." I could feel my own anger rising, but I forced myself to stay calm. "I'm not throwing it in your face, Julia. I'm just saying that I feel like every time I try to hold on to a little bit of something for myself, I'm being made to feel selfish. You got the car fixed, you got the surgery, and I didn't complain about a single cent." Julia crossed her arms, her voice sharp. "Well, maybe that's because you're only focused on yourself right now. Do you realize how you're coming across?" It was clear that we were spiraling into an argument neither of us wanted, but I couldn't shake the feeling that the sacrifice was always expected from me, and this time, I just wasn't ready to give in. Over the next few days, the tension was thick in the house. Emily and Julia seemed to be on the same page, casting me sideways looks as if I was some kind of villain for not handing over the money. I couldn't believe that this was happening, that a sudden stroke of luck was now at the center of a family conflict. It seemed that every time I tried to bring up the vacation plans, the room went cold, and Julia would find an excuse to leave, or Emily would sigh and shake her head. Finally, I decided it was time to put an end to the tension. One evening, after another uncomfortable dinner, I asked both Julia and Emily to sit down for a talk. I thought a lot about what I wanted to say, and I knew this was my moment to set things straight. "Listen," I began, my voice steady but firm. "I want to help you both understand my side of things. I love you both deeply, and I've always done my best to be there for you. But this lottery win, it was something I didn't expect, and for once, I wanted to use it for something that would bring me joy too." Julia and Emily exchanged glances, but neither interrupted, so I continued. "I've spent years prioritizing everyone else's needs, whether it's fixing the car, paying for surgeries, or covering college expenses. I'm not saying I regret any of that. I'd do it all again in a heartbeat. But just this once, I was hoping to do something for us, something we'd never normally be able to afford." Emily finally spoke, her voice quiet but filled with frustration. "But Dad, you don't understand the kind of pressure I'm under with these loans. It's like a weight on my back every single day. And now you have a chance to make it easier for me, but you'd rather go on some vacation?" I nodded, taking in her words. "I get it, Emily. I really do. But you need to understand that this vacation isn't just a selfish whim. It's something I've dreamed about, an escape from all the stress and hard work. You're young, and I know it's tough with the loans, but I also believe in your ability to make it on your own. Your mother and I didn't have much help, and we figured it out. I want you to have that same strength." Julia looked at me with a mix of disappointment and resignation. "So, that's it? You're just going to ignore our needs and stick to your plans?" I took a deep breath, steadying myself. "I'm not ignoring anyone's needs, Julia, but this is where I have to draw the line. I want this for us, for me, for you, for our family. But I need you both to respect my decision and understand that I'm doing this not just for myself, but because I believe that sometimes it's okay to finally put myself first. This one time." There was silence in the room as my words sank in. I could tell that Emily wasn't happy and Julia looked conflicted, but in that moment, I felt a strange sense of relief. For the first time, I'd stood my ground, and while it might not make everyone happy, it felt right. Over the next few days, the atmosphere gradually began to settle. Julia seemed to come around, though she didn't say it directly. Emily was still distant, but I hoped that, with time, she'd come to understand my perspective. This lottery win had brought challenges I hadn't expected, but I knew I'd made the right choice. The vacation plans moved forward, and though there was still some lingering tension, I was determined to make it a memorable experience for all of us. I hoped that once we were away, enjoying time together as a family, they'd see why this mattered so much to me. Sometimes life throws you surprises you never saw coming, but sometimes those surprises are an opportunity to finally stand up for what you believe is right, even if it means taking a hard stance with the people you love most. I'm a dad to a sweet, thoughtful little girl named Lily. She's the kind of kid who always puts others first. It's just who she is. This year, Lily's kindness really shone through when her best friend, Sophie, moved to a new town, far away from the school and neighborhood they'd grown up in together. Even though they couldn't see each other as much, Lily stayed positive and made sure to keep in touch, writing letters and sending little drawings to Sophie every week. As a dad, I couldn't be prouder of the heart she has. When the holidays rolled around, I asked Lily what she'd like as a gift this year. But instead of asking for something for herself, she had an unusual request. She looked up at me, eyes full of hope, and said, "Dad, could we get a special toy for Sophie? She's having a tough time making friends in her new school, and I think this might make her feel better." I could see how much it meant to Lily, and there was no way I was going to let her down. After some brainstorming, Lily decided on a particular toy Sophie had wanted for a long time. It was one of those popular new releases, a collectible doll that seemed impossible to find. I'd heard stories from other parents about how quickly they flew off the shelves, but I was determined. I mean, how often does your kid ask for a gift that's not for them, but for a friend? So I set out early Saturday morning on a mission, hopping from store to store, hoping to track down this elusive doll. Every shop I checked was either sold out or had long wait lists. Just when I was starting to lose hope, I decided to try one last toy store downtown. As soon as I walked in, I could see how packed it was. Parents everywhere, all after the same holiday gifts. I scanned the shelves, my heart racing, and there it was. One last doll, sitting on the shelf like it had been waiting just for me. I couldn't believe my luck. I quickly grabbed it and put it in my cart, feeling victorious. I could already picture Lily's excitement when I'd tell her that her plan to cheer up Sophie had worked. This was going to be a perfect surprise. But just as I turned to head for the checkout, I heard a voice behind me. "Excuse me," said a woman, her tone sharp. "I think you grabbed the last doll and I saw it first." I turned around to see a woman who looked just about ready to grab it out of my cart herself. She gave me a look that could cut through steel, clearly expecting me to just hand it over. I kept my tone polite but firm. "I'm sorry, but I was looking for this for my daughter's friend. She's been hoping to get this as a surprise for a while now." Her eyes narrowed and she crossed her arms. "Well, my niece wants that doll too, and I was standing right here when you picked it up. So if you don't mind." I could feel the tension rising, but I wasn't about to let go of something that meant so much to Lily. Not after the lengths I'd gone to find it. I took a deep breath, hoping this situation wouldn't turn into a bigger scene, but knowing deep down that this was going to be anything but easy. Just as I was about to move toward the checkout, the woman, clearly not taking no for an answer, stepped closer. She glanced at the doll in my cart and then looked straight at me, her eyes narrowing with irritation. "Listen," she began, voice sharp and insistent. "I saw that doll first. It's for my niece, and she deserves it. You should be considerate and hand it over." I took a deep breath, keeping my voice as calm as I could. "Ma'am, I understand it's a popular toy, but I grabbed it because my daughter wanted to gift it to her best friend. I've been looking all morning, and this is the only one I've managed to find." Instead of backing down, her expression darkened. She suddenly reached over, her hand darting toward my cart as if she was about to grab it herself. Instinctively, I pulled my cart a little closer, blocking her hand with my arm. "Please don't touch my cart," I said firmly, surprised at how bold she was being. That was all it took for her to go from irritated to outright furious. Her eyes widened, and out of nowhere, she started shouting, "Help! This man just assaulted me! Security, I need help!" Her voice cut through the noise of the crowded store, and people around us stopped to look. I was stunned. Assault? I hadn't even touched her. All I'd done was pull my cart back. I opened my mouth to respond, but she kept yelling, clutching her arm dramatically as if she was in pain. He just shoved me out of nowhere, and all because I asked for that doll back. This is unbelievable! More shoppers stopped to watch the commotion, some with shocked looks, others confused. I felt my face burning with embarrassment and frustration. This wasn't supposed to happen. I was just here to buy a gift for my daughter's friend, and now this woman was acting like I'd attacked her. Before I knew it, a store employee approached, looking concerned. "Is everything okay here?" he asked, glancing between me and the woman, who was still clutching her arm and putting on quite the performance. "This man assaulted me," she declared loudly, making sure everyone could hear. I asked him politely for the doll, and he just grabbed me. I tried to stay calm, despite the anger bubbling inside me. "Sir," I said, turning to the employee, "I didn't touch her. She tried to grab the doll out of my cart and I just pulled it back. That's all." The employee looked uncertain, glancing back and forth between us. Meanwhile, the woman continued her over-the-top performance, now demanding that the store call the police. At that point, I felt a mix of frustration and disbelief. I could see other shoppers whispering to each other, some giving me sympathetic looks, others clearly wondering if I had really done something wrong. All I wanted was to buy this gift and leave, but it seemed like this Karen was determined to make a spectacle out of the whole thing. I took a deep breath, preparing myself for whatever chaos was about to come next. As the police arrived, the woman doubled down on her story, insisting loudly that I had attacked her over the toy in my cart. She was speaking so loudly and dramatically that a small crowd of curious shoppers began to gather nearby. Her voice was almost shrill as she pointed her finger at me, tears miraculously welling up in her eyes. "I was just trying to get a doll for my niece," she told the officers, her voice wavering as if on the verge of tears. "And he just pushed me! It's completely unacceptable!" I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I tried to keep calm, but the absurdity of the situation was starting to grate on me. "Officers," I said, "I promise you, I didn't lay a hand on her. She tried to grab the toy out of my cart and I just pulled it back. That's all." One of the officers raised an eyebrow, clearly skeptical. "All right," he said, looking from her to me. "We'll need to see the store's security footage to get a clear picture of what happened here." The woman's expression didn't waver. She kept up her act, clutching her arm as if she was in pain, nodding along as if the security footage would vindicate her. I could tell she fully believed that her story would hold, that somehow the footage would paint her as the victim. She even let out a sigh of relief and dramatically thanked the officer for taking her seriously. Within minutes, the store manager appeared, gesturing for everyone to follow him to the back where the security office was. We all filed into the cramped room where a wall of monitors displayed live and recorded footage from every corner of the store. The manager pulled up the footage from the aisle where the incident had taken place, fast-forwarding until we appeared on the screen. It took all of 2 seconds to see the truth. The video showed me reaching for the doll and placing it in my cart. A few moments later, the woman approached, clearly agitated, and pointed at the doll in my cart. The footage showed her reaching directly into my cart and grabbing the toy. My only reaction had been to pull my cart back, moving it away from her grasp. At no point had I touched her. The officer, who had been skeptical earlier, turned to her with a stern expression. "Ma'am," he said, his voice colder, "the footage doesn't show him laying a hand on you. In fact, it shows you trying to take an item from his cart." For a brief moment, her face went blank, as if her mind couldn't quite process what was happening. Then, she quickly recovered and tried to explain, stumbling over her words. "Well, maybe he didn't touch me, but he was being aggressive. He blocked me. He was acting threatening." The officer's patience seemed to wear thin. "Ma'am, fabricating an assault is a serious matter," he said, his voice firm, "and we've got clear evidence that none of what you claimed happened." Just when I thought things couldn't get any stranger, one of the other officers, who had been quietly checking her ID, looked up with an eyebrow raised. "Ma'am," he said, "are you aware that you have an outstanding warrant for assault?" Her face went pale as she stammered, "What? No, that must be some kind of mistake." But the officer was already pulling up additional information on his device. "It says here that there's an active warrant in your name for a previous assault case. We're going to have to take you in for that." He pulled out a pair of handcuffs, stepping toward her. She panicked, her expression turning from shocked disbelief to pure desperation. No, this isn't right. You have it all wrong. I didn't do anything." But there was no arguing with the evidence, and the officer clicked the handcuffs onto her wrists with practiced ease. The small crowd that had gathered to witness the spectacle murmured among themselves, some people even stifling laughs or whispering to each other as the officers led her out. I watched as she was escorted out of the store, still protesting and insisting that she was innocent. The irony of the situation wasn't lost on me. A woman who had so confidently accused me of assault was now being taken in for her own actual history of it. The idea that her entire charade had completely backfired almost felt too good to be true. Once she was gone, the store manager turned to me, offering an apologetic smile. "I'm so sorry for all that, sir," he said. "It's unbelievable what some people will do. Can we help make this experience a little better? Maybe offer you a discount on your purchase?" I chuckled, finally feeling a sense of relief settle over me. "Thank you, but no need for the discount," I replied, glancing back at the doll still in my cart. "Just knowing I can leave here without any trouble is more than enough." The police officers nodded at me, giving small words of apology for the inconvenience as they left, and soon the crowd around us dispersed, everyone heading back to their own holiday shopping. 5 years ago, I had one of those nights that stays with you, no matter how hard you try to shake it off. I was working as an on-call tow truck driver back then, and most Saturday nights were pretty quiet. Around 11 p.m., I was just getting ready to call it a night, already in bed, thinking I'd have a full night's rest before any early morning call-outs. But the moment my head hit the pillow, my radio crackled to life. It was my dispatcher, sounding a bit more urgent than usual. "Hey Ben, you still awake?" he asked. "Yeah, I'm here," I replied, sitting up and grabbing my jacket. "What's going on?" "We got a bad one," he said. "Multi-car accident in the next town over. Police need it cleared as soon as possible. They want to keep the area secure, so drive safe, but get there quick." 10-4, I responded, already grabbing my keys. I was out the door in a matter of minutes, heart pounding, already picturing the scene I was heading into. The drive took about 20 minutes, and as I got closer to the town, I noticed the quiet streets, most people already asleep. But just a few streets down, the eerie flash of red and blue lights lit up the night. I could see the glow from a distance, and it only grew stronger as I neared the scene. Even before I arrived, I felt a strange, heavy sense of what I was about to face. As I approached, I could see the outlines of police cars, ambulances, and fire trucks lined up along the side of the road. The officers had blocked off a stretch of highway, rerouting cars to ensure no one accidentally drove into the crash site. It was a serious accident, the kind that puts a knot in your stomach just from looking at it. From what I could make out, several cars were involved, one of them overturned, with pieces of metal and debris scattered across the asphalt. The entire area was eerily quiet, except for the hum of emergency vehicle lights and the quiet murmur of first responders speaking to each other. I parked just outside the police barricade, grabbed my equipment, and walked over to one of the officers to check in. He gave me a quick nod and pointed towards the area they needed cleared first, an SUV that had taken a heavy hit and was now a crumpled mess. The occupants had already been transported to the hospital, but seeing the wreck, I could tell it was a miracle if anyone had survived. I had barely started to hook up the first vehicle when, out of the corner of my eye, I noticed a car creeping up towards the police barricade. At first, I figured it was just another driver who hadn't noticed the road closure signs, which, sadly, happens all the time. But then I noticed that this car wasn't slowing down. In fact, it was inching closer, as if the driver intended to push right past the barricade. One of the officers stepped forward, signaling the driver to stop. But instead of backing up or turning around like any reasonable person would, the driver rolled down her window. It was a woman, maybe in her 40s, with the look of someone who's used to getting her way. She had that impatient, annoyed expression, tapping her manicured nails on the steering wheel as she glared at the officer. "Ma'am, you need to turn around," the officer, Officer Sanders, said, keeping his tone professional but firm. "There's been a serious accident, and this road is closed." The woman huffed, clearly unimpressed. "Well, I have somewhere to be," she replied, waving a hand dismissively. "I don't see why you can't just move your cars for a second so I can get through." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Here we were, in the middle of dealing with a tragic accident scene, and this woman was acting like we'd set up the barricade just to inconvenience her night. "Ma'am, this is a crime scene and an active investigation. No one is allowed through here," Officer Sanders repeated, his voice slightly more forceful now. She crossed her arms, giving him a defiant look. "I don't care about your crime scene. I need to get home, and I'm not taking the long way around just because some people don't know how to drive." She actually rolled her eyes, as if the accident and the people involved were nothing more than a minor inconvenience in her day. Officer Sanders took a deep breath, clearly trying to keep his patience. "Ma'am, there have been fatalities here tonight. This road is closed to preserve evidence and for everyone's safety. I'm going to have to ask you again to please turn around and take the detour." Instead of listening, she did the unthinkable. She pressed down on the gas and tried to nudge her car forward, edging even closer to the barricade, as if she thought she could intimidate the police into moving. At this point, all of us, officers, paramedics, and even a few bystanders who had gathered at a safe distance, were watching her, stunned. Another officer stepped forward and put his hand firmly on the hood of her car, forcing her to stop. His expression was no longer patient. "Ma'am, if you don't turn this car around right now, we will be forced to detain you for interfering with a police investigation." The woman's face twisted with outrage. "Are you threatening me?" she shrieked, leaning out of her window. "This is harassment. I'll have you all fired for this." But the officer wasn't having it. He leaned down, his voice cold and calm. "No, ma'am. What you're doing is interfering with emergency services and a police investigation. I'm giving you one last chance to turn around, or you'll be facing charges." The woman, who I'd later come to think of as Karen, clearly wasn't satisfied with being told no by the officers. She sat there in her car fuming before throwing her door open and marching back up to Officer Sanders with her phone in hand, shouting, "That's it! I'm calling 911. You can't treat me like this. I'll have all of you fired." I could barely believe what I was seeing. Here we were, surrounded by the wreckage of a tragic accident, and this woman had the audacity to call 911 on the police officers already on the scene. She actually dialed the number, put her phone on speaker, and began shouting into the phone. "Yes, hello! I need to report police misconduct. I'm here on Main Street, and these officers are harassing me. They won't let me through, even though I have a right to be on this road!" she yelled, her voice echoing across the quiet scene. The 911 operator, clearly baffled, asked, "Ma'am, are you in immediate danger? Immediate danger?" she shrieked, clapping her hands loudly between each word as if it would somehow emphasize her point. "Yes, I am in danger. These officers are preventing me from going home, and I have every right to be here." Officer Sanders and his team exchanged glances, but they remained professional, letting her vent without interruption. I could see the officer's jaw clench as she continued, clearly frustrated by her behavior, but unwilling to escalate the situation unless necessary. The operator's voice came back over the phone, calm but firm. "Ma'am, you are currently calling 911 at an active accident scene. If the officers have instructed you not to pass, you need to follow their directions. Failure to do so could result in charges." Karen's face twisted in disbelief as she stammered, But that's insane! I'm the victim here!" Finally, Officer Sanders had enough. He took a step forward and addressed her directly. "Ma'am, this is your final warning. You're actively interfering with an emergency response. If you do not leave immediately, you will be charged with obstruction and interference with an investigation." She ignored him entirely, turning her attention back to her phone, now muttering that she needed to speak to someone higher up. It was clear that nothing short of the president himself would satisfy her, and maybe not even then. I could tell the officers were at the end of their patience. True to his word, Officer Sanders calmly turned to one of his colleagues and nodded. "Cuff her," he said, his voice low but resolute. The officer approached her, and she looked around, eyes wide with indignation. "Wait, what? You're arresting me? For what? For just wanting to go home?" She flailed as the officer gently but firmly guided her hands behind her back. "You are being charged with obstruction of justice, interference with an investigation, and assaulting an officer," the officer informed her. "You had multiple chances to leave peacefully, but you've continued to disrupt our work here." The moment the handcuffs clicked into place, she erupted, kicking and screaming. "This is illegal! I'm calling my lawyer! You're all going to regret this!" she screeched, trying to wriggle free of the officer's grip. The bystanders who had gathered began to murmur, some even laughing quietly at the spectacle she'd created. This scene that she'd escalated all on her own, purely out of entitlement and the refusal to follow simple directions, and now her behavior had landed her in handcuffs. As they led her toward the squad car, she continued to struggle, still shouting over her shoulder at the officers, insisting they would lose their jobs for daring to treat her this way. One of the paramedics, who'd been standing nearby, crossed his arms and shook his head, muttering under his breath, "Some people will do anything for attention." The officers managed to get her into the back of the squad car, where she finally fell silent, arms crossed and face flushed with anger. The weight of her actions seemed to settle in as she sat there, realizing the mess she'd created. A few days later, I heard the follow-up on the local news. It turns out Karen's outburst and blatant disregard for the law had led to charges not only of obstruction and interference with an investigation, but also for assaulting an officer when she'd tried to push past him to get through the barricade. The judge didn't seem amused by her excuses either. In court, she tried to argue that she'd simply been misunderstood, claiming she hadn't meant to cause trouble, that she just wanted to go home. But the security footage and witness statements painted a clear picture of her behavior. Her story didn't hold up, and the judge decided to make an example out of her. The above stories all convey lessons about the value of respect, patience, and responsibility. Selfish actions, from taking advantage of the kindness of relatives to disregarding the law for personal gain, all lead to undesirable consequences. Only by caring for others and following the rules can people receive fairness and trust from society. From this, we clearly see that honesty, respect, and gratitude are the foundation for maintaining sustainable relationships and building a civilized community. See you in the next episode. We always appreciate your support.